Kiara, and welcome to this second edition of BIM Education Talk, hosted by the National BIM Education Working Group in New Zealand. So this is the second of our BIM Talk series. Last session we had Professor Tamizi, all the way from Malaysia, who shared a lot of his experience on BIM implementation and assessment all across a nationwide policy. And last month, the previous session, I also gave a detailed brief on the background of the BIM Education Working Group, and also where we fit into the BIM Acceleration Committee for New Zealand. So I'll be uploading that video shortly and send all participants the link. So this month, we have Taija with us. So she's a senior lecturer from the Unitec School of Building Construction, who will be sharing with us over 10 years experience in BIM implementation on various topics, various subjects from her perspective. So I'll just pass the floor over to Taija, and then we just put in your questions and feel free to raise your hands if you have a question after her presentation. All right, Taija.
Thank you, Wallace. I'm going to share my screen with you, and I have two screens here, and I should have done something with the settings so that I would be looking at the same screen that I'm sharing, but unfortunately I didn't. So I hope you don't mind that I might be looking somewhere else than at you at times when I'm going this one through. So my name is Taija Puolitaival, and I come originally from Finland. I joined Unitec at 2012 when they were already on the way with their BIM journey. Now my background is in construction management education and consultation. So that's where what is kind of my core discipline, and then BIM sits kind of on top of that. Now, looking at the title that I have there. Now, when I joined Unitec in 2012, Unitec had departments instead of schools, and we were Department of Construction at that time. A couple of years ago, we changed to schools. So we became School of Building Construction. And actually from the start of this year, we joined with civil engineering. So now we are again something else, although we don't have an official name at the moment, because we are now officially part of the New Zealand Institute of Skills and Technology. And we have been asked to wait until they get their structures in place, and whether we will be called schools or something else, or whether there will be unity within those names among different polytechnics. So Unitec is not a university. We are an Institute of Technology, so we have a little bit different status. So we mainly teach at undergraduate level and vocational. We have some master's programs, but our school doesn't have any of them. Now, about the School of Buildings Construction. So this is more about the history of things. So not about the current situation where we are together with the civil engineers. So as the building construction discipline, we have four programs that we deliver. We have New Zealand Diploma in Architectural Technology and New Zealand Diploma in Construction. Those ones are national programs. So the program documentation is a national one and shared with many other institutes or with the current New Zealand Institute of Skills and Technology. We have Bachelor of Construction, with 3 majors, and then we have Graduate Diploma in Construction Project Management. The New Zealand Diploma sit at level 6, and then the 2 others sit at level 7 in our qualification framework. Altogether, we have about 800 EFTs, and we have a lot of part-time students. So our student numbers are quite a lot bigger than that 800. We are the biggest school at Unitec, and we have been that for a long time. Now, as a background, when I talk about our BIM integration and some of the pain points there, as we are not a university, we don't have that much autonomy when it comes to deciding what our programs look like and what programs we will develop. So we have NZBEWG, so the National New Zealand Qualification Authority, who dictates or decides what programs we are allowed to deliver. And as the program approval process is quite heavy, there are internal committees within Unitec who then guide through those processes, and sometimes you get through, sometimes you don't. I will tell about that one shortly. Now, this is the picture what I'm gonna tell you about today. Now, what I'm gonna tell is more of an overall view, what we have done. And I try to be as honest and direct as possible. That is inbuilt in my Finnish nature. So it is relatively easy for me. So I hope that this will be helpful for those ones who are on their journey to see what we have done and what has worked and what has not, and what the pain points might be there along the way. I hope that we will get our BIM Education Symposium on the way in late November, and that I will have a chance to talk there more specifically about certain courses and the teaching and learning and assessments methods that we do there. So that would be a more kind of an in-depth look into one area or course there. But this talk is more about the general. Now, as I said, I joined Unitec in 2012, but there were things going on already before I joined in terms of BIM. We had an associate professor who was very innovative in this area and who had been following the work that the Stanford University had been doing with their VDC development in the center of integrated facilities and what's the facility environment or something like that. So following that work, because that work actually started already in 1988. And he was also aware of the BIM mandate in Finland, which was set in place in 2007 by the Senate Properties, which is the entity that owns the government properties. So with that light, and also with the background that we do have the architectural technology program, where the students had been using BIM-capable software already for some time, he started thinking that whether we could do more with those models that the students developed there than just use them for documentation purposes, because that was the main point of that program, to make the technicians to be able to produce design documentation, not the models as such. The software or the documentation was created through the models, but the models were not really used for anything else. So he started thinking that okay, there are applications out there that we could do something else. And his background was in quantity surveying, so naturally he started investigating that one a bit more, that how we could use the models for cost estimation purposes, or more specifically quantity takeoff purposes. Now, he employed, or the department at that time employed, one of the AT students to create a model for that purpose, and it was called Blue Granite Building, and it is the one over here in the picture. He wanted to keep it relatively simple so that the complexity of the model wouldn't be on the way when learning how to actually use it. And they experimented with that one in a couple of quantity surveying courses, that how to investigate the model for quantity takeoff purposes. Now, at that time, we didn't know much about the modeling protocols and such for other purposes. The model was not really that suitable for construction management purposes, and it was not even tested at that time because there wasn't any lecturers who would have been keen on experimenting with that one. I used the model in 2012 or 2013 with my construction management students, and we noticed that we couldn't do any time simulations with it. But what we were able to do better than just with 2D documentation was, for example, to look at the foundation details and to understand what the appropriate construction methodology would be for those ones. So there were some benefits for that purpose, mainly for visualization of what the construction technology actually was. But these were the initial experimentations. Now, coming back to this timeline, there were, there was effort to try to spread the use of BIM to other courses as well, but there wasn't that good buy-in at that point from the staff, and there wasn't much going on in quantity surveying or in construction management disciplines in New Zealand industry either. So the time was not necessarily right. The industry or the education sector was not necessarily in New Zealand yet ready for that one. And those things that were tried out, for example, there was a proposal for a graduate diploma in BIM put together that never actually went through, because there wasn't enough industry support for that one. There was a lot happening in the design disciplines, but design is not what our department does. We are very much construction-specific department with the architectural technology there to support as well. So not much happened after those first experimentations. But the idea was still there behind, and it was even added as part of the department's strategic plan for 2010 to 2015. And as part of that one, when I was employed at Unitec, the reason was not purely BIM. I was employed as a construction management lecturer, but I'm sure that my knowledge and understanding of BIM had something to do that they chose me instead of somebody else. Now, when I started, we put together a BIM project group. There was 4 of us in that one. And we worked during the semester 1 to put together a proper BIM integration plan, that how would we approach this thing, what should we be doing, and when. Now, in that integration plan, the idea was integration as part of existing courses, as part of existing programs. So not to create anything new, but to integrate it there, because we believed, and we still believe, that that's how it should be, that BIM is not really a standalone topic. It is a new way of doing things, and therefore it should sit inside the existing programs. We have 3 different ways how we integrate it. we can have it as a theoretical topic. So those are more like discussions with the students about the benefits of BIM, or going through the BIM guidelines, what they look like, and so on. And then there's the more hands-on thing, which is BIM as a method of doing things. So that relates with the BIM uses in the New Zealand BIM handbook and various other BIM guidelines. So in that one, we would be using software and actually implementing those processes with the students. So for example, 3D coordination, 4D phase planning, or cost estimation. But I would say that the most common way that we have integrated BIM is the third one, and that is BIM as a learning tool. So use it as a visualization tool to understand better construction technology and systems, and from there construction methodology, and so on and so on. Our starting point, because at that time we actually had 5 programs, our starting point was from Bachelor of Construction, because otherwise it would have been a way too big task for us to cover. And there was a lot of similarities between the Bachelor of Construction and the National Diploma in Construction Management and Quantity Surveying that we had at that time. They sit at different levels, but there are, of course, similarities topic-wise. And AT program was quite far ahead already in the use of BIM-capable software. So we didn't really touch that much at that point. So we started from the Bachelor of Construction and decided that we are going to copy that approach across the programs that we have. We did quite wide staff consultation with that one, back and forth. We had questionnaires, and we had interviews, and we had staff meetings and all sorts of things with the staff to talk about specifically about their courses, and what it could look like in each individual course, and also that what would they need in terms of resources, in terms of training to get that done. We established or put together a Moodle shell called BIM Shed. Now the name of that one was a bit of an accident, because with my little bit different English pronunciation, I tried to articulate that we should have a shared resource for BIM, and somebody heard that as shed. So we thought that, okay, well, that's a good name for the Moodle model. Let's call it BIM Shed. And we started collecting resources under that one. So that was for everybody to put in resources there, but also for everybody to learn what is already there. And there wasn't that much yet at that point in the literature or so on. We noticed later on, though, that it became overwhelming and we don't use it anymore. So updating that didn't work anymore after a couple of years after that. But at the start, it was a good resource for us all. We arranged workshops internally because we had some skills and knowledge within our people. So we arranged workshops for our staff. And we also had some external training, so paid training, when it came to use of some of the software that we had. I was going through my files from that time when I was preparing this presentation, and this is the actual proposal that we handed, or one of the images from the proposal that we handed at the end of the period of the BIM project group. And when I started looking at this one, I think we actioned most of this one. The thing that didn't happen quite as we wanted to was the model development. So that's the light blue part over here. And that was because as part of this proposal, we had a business case where we wanted to have a BIM manager role established. That would be the person who would be coordinating the BIM integration for the first couple of years. And we also wanted to have a BIM technician because we desperately needed models for education purposes. And we wanted to have a technician for that purpose. We got funding from Unitec for the BIM manager role, but we didn't get that for the BIM technician. So we need to be quite creative then how we're gonna source those models. And I will talk about that one a bit more later. Now, this was the overall plan, what the BCons plan looked like. So this covers all the courses that we had at that time in BCons, and a short description what BIM could look like in each of those courses. Now, some of the courses, as you may notice, don't have anything in them, and that might be for multiple reasons. For one, that it doesn't have any connection with BIM. For example, we have development and finance there as such, or we thought that it would be too early to introduce yet something or so on. So looking at those ones a little bit more detail now, technical fundamentals was and still is one of our first courses. So we thought that that would be a good place to introduce what BIM actually is and talk a little bit about 3, 4, and 5D BIM there. Another course in year 2 then was tendering. And in that one, the content was theoretical, but talking about what the role of BIM would be in the pre-tender and tender analysis itself. And then going on to the 3rd year courses, getting a little bit more complex and a little bit more hands-on. Construction sequence simulations, construction methodology investigations in those ones. So that's what our plan looked like at that point. And how these were developed, they were developed partly as ideas from that BIM project group, but then with talking to the staff on these specific courses, that what would they think that would actually work. So that was the situation in 2012. The BIM manager role was established from the start of 2013, and it continued for 2 years. I was successful in getting that role and happy to be leading the coordination of the integration. Together with that one, because we didn't get that technician role as well. And I knew that it was too difficult for me to do this just by myself. And I really liked the work that we did together as the BIM project group. So I wanted to have a VDC team with me to develop these things, to think these things through so that I wouldn't be alone deciding on things. So we established a VDC team and a VDC center where we all sat. These were just part of our work. So we were still teaching and doing research, but we had these additional roles, these additional hours included in our workloads for this purpose. Within the VDC team, we had representatives from the architectural technology and building services. The representatives of those ones had also very thorough understanding of construction technologies. We had a QS there, so for cost estimation, and then I was the construction management expert in that group. So we wanted to cover all the subject areas that we were teaching so that we would have a wide coverage and understanding of the courses that we teach. Now, we took the responsibility of sourcing and developing then the models for teaching purposes. We used some of the models that our AT students did. We sourced some with some funding from the industry. We talked with Unitec Facilities Management and we got some models from them as well later. And in addition to that one, we also looked what staff training and resources would be needed for this work. We did or have been doing BIM education related research as well as part of this. So we kind of utilized this work that we did as a research project, because as you know, it is always very time consuming to collect data separately. So we decided that why not use all this what we do so that we can actually use it as research outputs as well. We all have tried our best with ongoing collaboration with the industry. So within all those different disciplines, we had wide range of connections with the industry and really good support from there, from many companies in terms of telling us whether we are on the right track, providing us some resources, and also being guest lecturers in our courses. We also have collaborated with Unitec Facilities Management, so there is always an opportunity for all tertiary institutes to do that, because I don't think that we utilize that well enough. So that is a professional unit inside each tertiary institute, which you can actually work with so that it will benefit both sides. So we have done some research and development work for them. And what they have done is they have provided us models for our educational purposes. At the start, the models were facilities management specific, so not as useful on a wide range of courses. But when with every new build or every big renovation that Unitec has had, BIM has been an essential part of it, and those models from those projects have been handed over to us to use in our courses. And here are some examples that are at the bottom of those models that we have either obtained from the industry, this one here on the right, the next one from right, that's one of the Unitec buildings. This one here is, which is the second one from the left, is one that a couple of our students created. And this one here on the left is from the AT program, so some of those ones that they produce as part of their courses. Now, this is one of the examples of those how we use BIM as a visual aid in our teaching. So more as a teaching and learning tool and not as a topic itself. So this works brilliantly for those ones who have English as a second language, because they can go through this model item by item by clicking them and understanding what those different parts of the building are called. Another example to understand a little bit better building services. So this is from our lecturer, Phil Etherington, who is nowadays with ARA. So he developed some of these building services models for his teaching purposes. We created some demos for site planning and organization purposes, and later our students have created these themselves as well. And then this is the model that our AT students created, and we have used this one for sequence simulation purposes. So here it sits with Navisworks. So students use this in one of our planning and organization courses. And investigate what the right sequence would be to build that. These are images from Unitec new buildings, and we have the models that sit behind these ones so that we can use them in our teaching as well. This particular one is relatively complex building, so we usually try to use the model so that we first introduce something simple, so more of a warehouse or something like that to the students, and then when they are more familiar with the software at the last year of their studies, then we go to more complex models as these ones are. Now, in 2014, we had a big change in our bachelor program. Basically, most of the courses changed and our delivery methods changed as well. And as part of that one, we introduced one BIM specific course, which is called Advanced BIM in Construction. You can see the learning outcomes over here, and when you have a look at them, you see that they are relatively flexible, and we wanted to keep it as such. This is a course that sits in the last year of the bachelor, so the students have a good understanding about construction when they start this one. And the course content has changed a bit. From 2015, I'm running the course in this semester too, again. And we try to keep it as current as possible, looking where the industry is and a little bit ahead of it, so that we can guide our students to understand what the future holds for them. Now, as part of our integration plan, the idea was not to create any BIM specific courses, but in hindsight, I would say that it would have been beneficial to have one at the start as well. And we kind of have one now, which we just started a couple of years ago, but that is an elective. So only about a third of the bachelor students choose that one. And that is again, well, that is one of the issues what we have with a crowded curricula, that we cannot really fit everything in. And I will come back to that one when I talk about the pain points shortly. We have another BIM specific course which sits in the New Zealand Diploma of Architectural Technology. There was a national reform of those diplomas in 2016. I think the work happened. And as part of that one, this course was introduced into it. So this is for the architectural technology students. Now, as this is a New Zealand diploma, different institutes of polytechnics have decided different approaches with this one. Again, the learning outcomes are relatively flexible to allow them to do that. Some institutes introduce Revit in this course, and most of the work in this course is done around that. Our AT program uses Revit a lot already, courses before this, and we have other BIM content there too. So we have been able to go a little bit further and introduce other BIM uses. So give the AT students an understanding of what are the other purposes that the models are created, and not just the design documentation. That is the most usual one in that diploma. Now, I'm just gonna jump a bit here. Okay. Now, you notice that I haven't talked anything about these two items over here. I did mention the graduate diploma proposal, which didn't go through because the time was not right. New Zealand was not yet ready for that one. But we did put together a business case already in 2014 to have a fourth major in our Bachelor of Construction, which would have been called technology major. For various reasons, which some of them are actually not even known to me, that has never gone through the Unitec internal approval systems. We do have some courses from that technology major approved, but not the major itself. So we have these ones sitting here in the back burner, waiting to be developed and delivered at some point, but we have not yet started that work. Now, working through the pain points, that lack of support for our technology major has been one of the major ones. We have had really good industry support to support that major, but for some reason, and I'm just going to be perfectly honest here, there is some internal politics going on or something that has just prevented it never actually realizing. So we have not been able to have that as we wanted to. We wanted to have also a graduate diploma from that, which would have specialized in BIM. So as the original idea was already in 2011 to have that, but instead of having it just fully separately, it would have been something that would have emerged from the technology major in the bachelor. So there is always that resistance to change and some tertiary education politics. Like I said, we as Institute of Technology or Polytechnics, we don't have as much autonomy as universities have when it comes to program development and deciding on these things. But if I start from the first bullet point there, I think the first obstacle that we had was the lack of suitable building information models itself. We had some that the 80 students had developed, but we didn't really have much anything for commercial construction and no complex models or so. Industry was really reluctant for years and years to provide any models. And I felt that maybe they were a little bit insecure, that they didn't want to have their work exposed or critiqued. We would not have done it in that way anyway, but still they didn't want to provide us models. So we just had to find ways how to find those models. And Unitec Facilities Management was one of those sources then later on that we were able to utilize. And we were able to get a bit of research funding. And under that research funding, we were able to develop a couple of models for our purposes. Now we have nowadays got some models from the industry, and then the AT models are getting better and better, and we have got more models from the Unitec Facilities Management as well. So we have a relatively good suite of models, although we still lack high-rise buildings and that sort of complex building models. But I would say that at the moment, we can do with the models that we have. We just need to be a little bit creative how we use them. Staff skills and knowledge, well, that is always a thing. There isn't just a lack of skills and knowledge in the industry, it is also in the education. We have had a lot of staff changes over the years as well, and it's always difficult to keep all the staff knowledgeable within this topic area, because when we are looking for new staff, there are many other criteria that they need to fill. And then there's always the question about the permanent and casual staff. So whether the casual staff is motivated to invest time in learning this if they don't already have the skills. We do have some good casual staff who actually are experts in this area, for example, in quantity surveying area. There is always the motivational factors, that if the staff member has enough motivation to learn these things, because this does require considerable amount of time, and it does require considerable more amount of time to use BIM models in your courses than just to go with 2D documentation. I can sign that because I have used models and I have used 2D documentation in the past, and just going with the 2D is much less time consuming in many ways. But I still think that it's much better learning for the students to use the models. So that's the way to go. There's always the time for developing yourself, and there's always the resources as well. So whether you need to take a course or a workshop somewhere else, and whether you get funding for that one. Then the resistance to change, like I said. At the moment, I would say that we don't have that much of that within the staff. It all comes to the motivational factors and those ones. I think we have a really good buy-in. I don't think that there are any skeptics anymore, because when we started this work, there was a lot of skepticism within the industry and within the education sector that whether this BIM is gonna go anywhere in New Zealand. I was very convinced that it will, because it had elsewhere. But it was really difficult to convince other people on that, specifically if people in the industry doubted that as well. You don't always get the best support from the management in your tertiary institution. And I'm not now talking about our school management or the department management in the past. I'm talking about the higher level management that we have at Unitec. So we haven't got the support that we have needed. We have had a couple of big restructuring, and as a result of those ones, we have lost a lot of staff. And because of that, we have had to focus more on our basic teaching instead of any development projects or developing our courses or programs and so on. As part of that one is that we have never been able to get that technology major through inside Unitec, and we would have really needed to have that to keep the momentum going. We have been able to do a lot by integrating this as part of the programs, but we have the inspiration, we have the motivation to go further than that. And I think that the industry needs more than that. But at the moment, our hands are tied. No space in the curricula, that is a very common thing. So that the curricula is so crowded that it's very difficult to chuck anything new in, any new courses or anything inside the existing courses. And one of the things there that makes the curricula so crowded for this one is that the industry's current operating mode, because it is operating a dual mode. So we still need to teach the traditional, and we cannot just focus on the new. So fitting those both in is not an easy job. How to do it in a clever way, how to do it in a way that you actually have graduates who have those capabilities that the industry needs now and in the future. So that's me. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Taija, for this very informative presentation. I think I could also share into the ideas of having crowded curriculum, because over here at Victoria University, we have lots of students taking double degrees. So it's very difficult to introduce a standalone course. From what I gather, if you introduce an elective, it takes, after 3 years cycle, it needs to be a permanent course, or it will be taken off the course list. So it's quite difficult to work within a crowded curriculum. There's a question on just looking at your timeline. It took about 10 years. Is there any a shorter route for just new entrants and new departments trying to set up a BIM course? Is there any short, faster route for them?
Yeah, we have been on the road, so to speak, from 2008, 2009, but we got quite a good amount of things done between 2012 and 2015. So the journey doesn't need to be that long. So I would say that we got pretty far already by 2015. What we have been able to do after that has been slower, because we would have wanted to go further than what Unitec has allowed us.
All right. Please, if you have any questions, you could just unmute or raise up your hand. It's quite interesting to see how you work with the VDC team. I remember we had lots of debates around what actually BIM is to everyone in the industry. So I don't know how you guys worked around having different themes, different expectations.
I think we have approached it via our programs and the subjects that we teach. And yeah, how we see BIM is that it's a new way of doing things, and it's quite holistical in that sense. So there are many things, like the New Zealand BIM handbook says. We have the people, we have the policy, we have the processes, and what's the fourth one? Technology. So there is a lot what one can do in individual courses. So how you can actually connect BIM or digital construction with that one. So I know that many think easily that BIM is just about the software and use of the software, but it's much more than that. So you can connect with those courses as well, where you wouldn't even think about using software, because you don't have to, because you can talk about in terms of tendering, like I introduced earlier, or you can talk about it in terms of contracts or contract administration. So there are many topics where you don't even touch the models or the technology itself.
I had a course where I went in to give a guest lecture on BIM and costing. So I could see like that surprise from the students to see that all they've been doing manually could be done in an automated manner with BIM capable software. So yeah, it's quite interesting to see how those fit into other courses. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, our approach has been that, because we do need to balance with the traditional and with the new, is that we start from the very principles. For example, with quantity surveying, we start with the very principles of the quantity take-offs and why it needs to be done in a certain way. And first do it in a more manual way by using Excel spreadsheets and so on. And then when the students understand why they need to do things in a certain way, then in later courses we introduce the technology. So we use Costex in those courses, and students work on a model.
All right, we have two questions. One question is about as BIM becomes the new normal, what is the prospects of BIM globally? So probably what are the future outlook of BIM?
Um, I guess for us it would mean that when we're talking about that crowded curricula, that it would help a bit with that one, because we wouldn't need to be focusing that much on the traditional ways of doing things. I think what this all basically means is that you need to be constantly following where the industry is with it, so that you can keep up or preferably be a little bit ahead. So in New Zealand, we are not ahead of the game when it comes to BIM implementation in the industry. We are quite good at it already, so we have made a good progress. So for our education, I would say that it would be beneficial not to just focus on what New Zealand industry is doing at the moment, but also looking at what is happening internationally, where things are maybe a little bit more advanced, and kind of continuously track that one, so that your education is keeping the same pace. So you cannot just sit still. And I think that is why I became interested in BIM in the first place. Because I keep telling this old joke from my early times as a bachelor student. So we had a joke between us building construction students that there is high tech, there's high tech, there is low tech, there's no tech, and then there's building construction. And I'm so happy that that's not true anymore.
Yes, yes.
That we
So
actually
just looking
have
at,
been there. Yeah, and
in
there was a
a,
long time when there was really not much changing in the construction industry. And finally, we have the change here. And that keeps me motivated because it just makes things much more interesting.
yeah, just looking at how far we've come in terms of technology adoption. So the future looks at things like machine learning, IoT, Internet of Things, and much more advanced algorithm. So since we are still trying to cope with BIM implementation within uh, courses and trying to get this up and running, how do you see us moving in that direction? Just staying
Uh,
ahead.
Slowly, but hopefully firmly. Um, we have tried that with our technology major. We have not been able, as I already said, to get there. So we have courses in place, the ones that you can see there on the bottom left, which would include this type of technology. Um, Again, the issue is that how do you fit everything in? Uh, and that is a challenge that I have not been yet able to fully solve. We need to keep following what the industry is doing in this respect, here locally, but also internationally, and what education is doing internationally as well, and learn from that. So looking at that one, I went through a lot of BIM education literature, all that I was able to find when we were going through our development stages. And that informed me, for example, that the integrated approach was the way to go. So, yeah, there is a lot of information out there. I think the challenge nowadays is to find the right information, because there is so much out there.
All right. There's one more question about academic curriculum. If our curriculum really matches the needs of the industry, and if there's any gaps, what's your opinion on filling those gaps?
At the start of our integration plan, before we actually put it in place, we had a big hui with the industry. We had major players, both from construction, main contractors, and from the design disciplines, the big companies represented in that one. We had a discussion with them that whether our approach is the right one to go. So I would say that some sort of advisory boards are essential to keep in contact with them. In addition to that one, the individual connections that everybody has with the industry, to have those not just once a year discussions, but actually have ongoing discussions with the industry. What are they actually doing, and how are our graduates meeting those needs? Also to have industry as your guest lecturers involved. We have our casual lecturers, they work in the industry as their full-time work. So have all that connected together, you can keep it actually industry relevant. But as I already said, I don't think it's enough to just look how the local industry is doing. I think you need to look broader than that. Because you need to be, as an educator, you need to be a bit of head of the local industry. Because you are educating your students for the future, not for this time.
All right. So just looking internationally, there's a question about compulsory mandation of BIM, taking the UK mandate for level 2 BIM compliance, which really forced adaptation and acceleration of BIM implementation. So is there any future plans for the New Zealand government to mandate a push for BIM?
There are probably other people who know the answer to this one better, but what I have understood from all the discussions with the BIM Acceleration Committee, that there isn't any such thing coming in. And from my experience from Finland, I can say that it's not the savior fully, because what still happens back in Finland is that the small players, they are not necessarily BIM capable. So the mandating doesn't necessarily guarantee that the whole industry would be equal players there. It does mean that all the big players need to be really good at using BIM, because otherwise they don't get the government projects. But it doesn't mean that then the subcontractor level would be there.
All right, that's a pretty interesting view on mandating BIM. Do we have any other questions before we close up the session?
Yes, sorry, I've just got one question, Taija. Thank you for that. That was really informative. So one of my projects that I worked on in Australia, we actually integrated BIM on the project, and our QS used it quite a bit. My biggest hurdle that I faced really when using BIM was the coordination between the consultants. What's your view on that, just in terms of like coordination between sort of BIM model?
I would say that it all starts from the BIM execution plan. So before you start doing anything, you actually agree how those things are done. And when that is on paper, when you have agreed, when you together, then it all goes much smoother. So you know what you are doing and when you should be doing and who is responsible for doing it. So the BIM execution plan is one of the key agreements in that one, and it's a living document, so it's not just put together at the start of the project, but it can be changed later on as well. Yeah, I would say that that's the key, because it kind of sets the scene and kind of also that how you work together. Yeah.
Right. There's one question on what's the main influencing factor for BIM adoption within small and medium scale enterprises?
Now that is a really interesting question. I think the obstacles have been and challenges have been quite well investigated, but I haven't read that much about the drivers. Usually for the small business, it's about the survival. So if they cannot no longer operate in the environment without the knowledge, then you have to invest in that one. But BIM is a really tricky one in the sense because it is an investment. So you need to put money or time, which is money, in front before you can get anything out from it. To be honest, I don't really know the answer to that one.
Yes, I guess it's continuous upskilling of both your resources and human. Just giving from your presentation as well, you covered lots of the trainings your staff members had to go through. I think, yeah, upskilling is quite important. Do we have any other questions before we end the session? We're already about 1 hour into. All right, so if there's no questions, I would just like to thank Taija for this informative presentation, and I'm going to make the recordings available to all participants, and do look out for the next BIM education talk, which will be taking place about this time next month. We'll be having a very interesting speaker from Australia, Azia Kiyon. So she has lots of expertise in BIM and heritage education, and looking forward to seeing you all online next month. Thanks, Taija, and thanks everyone for joining in across the world, and we'll see you again next month.
Thanks. Bye.